How would you define your art then now?
My art. I was trained as a sculptor in the 70s, early 70s. I did sculpture at college. And then I went into studios in the mid-70s in London, in an area called Wapping. And I started painting in the 80s. And then I've always done a lot of photography. So photography was very much part of my work. And then when computers came along, it kind of homogenized a lot of my two-dimensional work, like my painting, my photography. And so that became, digital work became another part of my work. So I'm an artist, I suppose. You know, and it's, I have no particular, I mean, I am where I am at any one time. I'm working on some waxes at the moment for some bronzes. I'm working directly in wax to take to the foundry. Sometimes I carve, sometimes I construct. So it goes back and forth. My favourite work is whatever I'm doing next, you know.
Do you feel that you've get your inspiration from Wales or from all over? Or?
Yeah, since I've been back, definitely. It's been a huge, I mean, my early part of my career, as I said, was in London. So I was very much part then of, I was a young artist, I was in my 20s, you know, so I was very much about being contemporary and what was happening at the time in London. So you kind of struggle. I mean, it's said that you do your best work when you're about late 20s, 28 or something. I don't actually think that's true, but I definitely think that you try and forge your identity by that age. So a lot of your best work comes from that struggle to identity. Now, I came back to Wales in 1987, and the first thing that struck me was that I went to a local pub, and there were artists of my age who spoke Welsh. Well, I grew up in an area, I grew up in Bridgend, where very little Welsh was spoken by any of my age. So that was a strange thing for me to come across. And that kind of got me thinking about the identity of being Welsh, really. I mean, I always felt Welsh. When I was in London, I always felt Welsh. I knew I was from somewhere else. And then since then, I've kind of learned a lot more about my own culture that wasn't around when I was young in Bridgend. I didn't realise what was going on. I mean, teachers in school used to say to us, did we feel we were missing something by not speaking Welsh? But we didn't. You don't miss what you don't have, you know.
How would you define the art scene in Wales then? Is it different to England? Or
it is very different. Not England, it's different to London. The rest of England is different to London. In terms of contemporary art, anything of any profile, you'll find in London. It's just the way it is. You find the same in music, you find the same in lots of things. The difficulty you have the art in Wales is the lack of profile in Wales. I mean, we have our own gallery here, and we're a cooperative by structure. It's very difficult to encourage people to come into the gallery who wouldn't normally go into the gallery. Art in Wales is not really something which is high on people's agenda. You know, you tend to live in a bubble in the arts in Cardiff. And there's no real commercial scene which tends to drive the arts in London.
But galleries closed?
A lot of galleries have closed, yeah. I've seen 2 or 3 close in the last few years. Galleries open up in Wales with all the best of intentions of being contemporary and trying to show working artists like ourselves. But I think needs must, and they end up selling the kind of work that sells, you know, and I think that's got a limited lifespan, shelf life, and I think that eventually folds, you know.
Has Wales got anything to offer on the international stage, do you think?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, there's loads of artists working in Cardiff and the rest of Wales who are really good artists, you know, and there's a sort of, as you get older as an artist, you reevaluate all the time, and you see things now that you wouldn't have given time of day to 20, 30 years ago. And you look at stuff, and then an artist will come out of obscurity, and that will throw the entire art history into question. That how do you not know about this person, you know? And same as music, they'll suddenly discover somebody was doing something the same time as whoever, and they made a major thing. Now Wales has got loads of stuff to offer. It's just again that profile thing of how do you get that? So there's nothing really on television, for example, of any great profile. There's very little on radio. You know, so it's very hard to get people engaged in art and think about art. So there's lots of good art going on, but where that good art meets the public is something else.
So you've got a course here today.
Yeah.
How long have you been teaching adults?
I've been teaching adults for 40 years. I started teaching adults. I did my teaching in London in 1978, and I started teaching adults then. I taught in London for nearly 11, 12 years. And then when I came home, I set up the sculpture course up in Howardian Centre in Cardiff, and I ran that for 30 odd years. I retired 3 years ago, and I run courses now once a month for a week.
Is there much of a difference between teaching adults and children?
Oh, completely, yeah. Yeah, adults, children are sponges. I mean, they will do what you tell them what to do and send them off, and they go off and do it. And they're not bothered about how it really looks. I mean, they just love the process of doing something, and they have quite a short attention span to it. Once they've done what they think they've done, that's it. They'll go and move on. Adults are more patient, and they tend to... They've had lives, so there's a whole interest. Teaching adults, I learn as much as I teach from them, you know, from what their experience and life experience and stuff. The work they make is you know, whatever they can do in a couple of hours a week for a term, you know.
And have you been impressed by what they've done?
Yeah, constantly. Yeah, constantly. And the beauty of my courses is that you have wood carving, stone carving, sculpture, so they're never short of ideas. So when they come in, they might not be like, for example, a quick thing. If you advertised a course to adults as sculpture, you'd be very lucky to get a class, because people wouldn't really see how they could make a sculpture, because most people's sculpture is in the city centre and it's big and bronze. So you wouldn't get people. If you say carving, you'd get people, because they can more or less work out it's to do with chisels and materials. You know, so there's a kind of, they may not know they can do it, but once they start, it's, you know. See you in August. You got the date?
Yeah, you wrote it down for me.
Fantastic.
See you soon.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, so yeah, and it's very much, my classes intentionally are very social. I encourage people to talk, and I bring in things all the time about art. So I introduce contemporary art that they've never probably come across and stuff, and that's all to do with process. I mean, and they definitely appreciate. For example, with stone carving, stone's a material which is very heavy, but it's quite weak to its structure, engineering-wise. So if you look at a sculpture in a museum carved in marble, for example, there's always a lump of something by the feet, a log, or a dog, or a bit of a dress that's curled around. And that's basically engineering to keep the thing up, because it's very weak around the ankles. So things like that, and then people go to museums and think, oh, I know why that's there. You know, and it's quite nice that you can introduce lots of fundamental things about sculpture just by using the processes, you know.
How long have you been doing, is it sculpture or carving? Or
stone carving, yeah.
How long have you been doing it?
I think it must be about 10 or 12 years, yes.
So since you were an adult then? Really?
Oh yes, definitely, yes.
What do you get out of it then? Is it?
Just the delight in turning a piece of stone into something that people appreciate, I think, and that I appreciate, yeah.
Did you ever think you could do that?
No, I didn't think that at all, no.
Why did you come on the course?
Well, very late on I decided to do my A-level art at Llanover Hall, and that was good because it made me do lots of different media, and one of the things I had to do was 3D, and I made a family of herons out of wire for my final set piece, and really enjoyed doing it. And a very good friend of mine said, you're really good at this 3D stuff, why don't you try and do more of it? And So I started looking around for night classes and came across Alun's one mentioning wood carving and stone carving. And I thought, yeah, I could try that. Yeah.
What's your background then? It's nothing to do
My
with that.
background had nothing to do with that. I started off as hospital pharmacist. And then having done that for 16 years, I jumped ship, so to speak, and retrained as a homeopath in alternative medicine. So my background's been entirely scientific. Yeah.
Has it fed into what you're doing now, do you think?
No, I think it goes back to time at school when I really enjoyed doing art, but I'm essentially a practical person and I knew how to earn my living, so I always, as I dropped art very quickly and concentrated on science, but it's always been nibbling away in the background, waiting for me to get back to it, I think. Yeah.
With the bowl there, why did you decide to do it?
This was some friends of mine who've just moved to Abergavenny and they'd had to leave their previous bird bath behind in the garden. And they wanted me to make one to suit their garden. And so I came up with a few designs for them and they picked that one, and then I took the bowl up, because I'd finished that first, to show them, and they decided they would like a rhomboid shaped base on it, because originally it was going to have a sort of tall square pedestal. So there we are, making a rhomboid to go underneath it to complement it, because it's very different.
Well, it's a lovely piece of work. Do you think you'll continue now doing more?
Yes, I hope so. Yeah, very much so.
What sort of thing would you like to do in the future?
I don't know, I just go from one piece to the next really. I haven't got any sort of great ideas. I've got some small pieces of soapstone that I can work with at home, and I might make a fish or something for a friend of mine who's got a 70th birthday coming up. I think she might like something in that. It's a nice green, translucent piece of stone, just waiting to be turned into something else.
Do you find it therapeutic then?
Yeah, I sort of completely forget what I'm doing when I'm doing that. Even though it's hard work today in the hot sunshine, just get into it. Time goes.
Does Alun inspire you?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Thanks very much.
Very definitely. Makes all the difference.
That's great, thanks.
And if you get stuck with anything, he can sort it out.